Okay. Hello and welcome to
Hi there.
week 5 of the Psychology of Eating. We have a special guest today, Chris Phillips. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
He is going to talk to us about his experiences with having an eating disorder. And so first, Chris, I'd just like you to talk about how did you know? How did you know that there was something going on that kind of would fall in that disordered eating or exercise category?
Yeah, so I guess my journey kind of started with wrestling. I began wrestling in 6th grade, and beginning in 6th grade immediately, there were some particular kids on the team that would call me fat after every practice, and that was something that consistently happened too, like for the entire wrestling season. And so then that eventually kind of got ingrained into my mind that like just like regardless of how my body looked or felt, I just kind of just thought that I was fat, like there was nothing or yeah, just that eventually got ingrained into my mind. And kind of thinking of like my family, how my family isn't the healthiest, and I really started to get into some thinking that like regardless of what's happened, like I'm going to look like this, and I basically became afraid of what could potentially happen, even though I wasn't fat, like I didn't look like that. Just constantly being told that repetitively kind of ingrained that into me. And so from the span of like 7th grade to freshman year of high school, I wrestled in the same weight class with the goal of basically pleasing my teammates and doing like what I thought was what I should do. Like, because in wrestling, they use eating disorder behaviors like to gain an advantage, like the stereotypical like cutting weight for wrestling, and tends to be in an unhealthy way of like especially binging on exercise, like over exercise to cut excessive weight and stuff like that. So kind of going into high school, I noticed that those eating disorder behaviors kind of started to become more and more like habitual for me. And so during the season, especially, I would like cut weight for a tournament or wrestling match. And then after the tournaments, like wrestlers would just binge because like like we would essentially deprive ourselves of any nutrients, water and whatnot. And then afterwards we would, just eat like as much as we could because we could. And that's kind of just how the culture in wrestling becomes, is you definitely develop a tough relationship with food. And so around sophomore year of high school, I noticed that even when I wasn't during wrestling season, these behaviors were continuing. Like I would exercise excessively for like, I would go to the gym for 2-3 hours just because I felt like that's what I had to do. And to stay confident, and just, I guess my body became addicted to it in a sense of feeling that working out. And that would also lead into me overeating and binge eating, and then would kind of turn into a cycle of binge eating along with over exercising to compensate for that. But technically I was diagnosed with exercise bulimia nervosa. So I would purge like with both over exercising and purging, like forcing myself to throw up after meals. And that's when I really noticed that something was wrong. Was like even just at home, I would binge in the kitchen, and then without my parents knowing, I would literally go in the backyard and like make myself throw up in the backyard at like 11 p.m. at night, when everybody was sleeping. And when it got to that point, that's when I realized like that something is not right, like that I was really suffering. And eventually I just realized that I had to get help, that there is no other way that I would get better, and that it was only going to get worse if I didn't get help.
So started in 6th grade, then what grade were you in when you finally realized you needed to get help?
I would say it was, I'm pretty sure my junior year of high school, where things really got out of hand, and I realized I needed to get help.
So what did that look like for you? Because with eating disorders, sometimes there's a dietitian involved, sometimes there's a therapist involved, sometimes there's a psychiatrist involved. Sometimes there's a treatment center. So can you walk us a little bit through your treatment experience?
Yeah, definitely. So with me, when the eating disorder behaviors really picked up, um, I wasn't seeing any particular therapist or counselor, and I didn't let anybody know. Like on the wrestling team too, I kept that. Of course, with the stigma behind it, I was kind of at first, I was afraid, like of what people would think of me, and that they might look down on me, just because of the stigma behind it. And so I definitely kept that on the down low, and um, I only told like my one best friend, and my one best friend, he or his partner at the time also struggled with an eating disorder, and so kind of talking with them, and um, yeah, just basically, I guess talking with them helped me realize that like that I had to get help, that there was no other way, and it did take a while, of course. Like there were, I think, even after talking with them, it was another probably 6 months or so of the behaviors continuing, until I basically just broke and went to my mom and told her that I needed help, and like told her everything that had been happening. And so it was kind of just like that. I basically got to my breaking point where I had to like go to my mom, and then my mom luckily was able to connect me with Kaylee Featherstone here at the Eating Disorder Center in the Valley.
So how long do you feel like you went from when you started to see Kaylee to where you felt like you were making progress? Can you walk us through? Because I know there's a lot of challenges in treatment. And a lot of people feel like, oh, it's just flip a switch, right? And then you're healed. And it's like, no, not. When you have these cognitions that you're trying to, like you said, since you were in 6th grade, you thought you were fat. You weren't, but you thought you were. So how long did it take before you really started feeling like you were making headway on changing those cognitions?
Yeah, for me, I'd say overall for me it was kind of quick. Luckily, like once I got into see Kaylee, at the time I wasn't wrestling anymore, so or like it was at least like during the off season. So I wasn't having that. I guess that was like a big weight off my shoulder, is not having like that pressure of the season and whatnot. And so then I was really able to like dive into the treatment with Kaylee, and from there I just really started to apply and use the tools that she taught me, and showed me. And that I'd say for me at least, some of the biggest things in treatment was of course community, like connecting with people, sharing my experiences, and also developing like my healthy relationship with food through intuitive eating, and like just really listening to my body, and I would help develop that like through mindfulness and meditation. So I picked up like a meditation routine every single morning, kind of like positive affirmations, trying to have like self-love and self-care. And so then like through the meditation and then just practicing mindfulness throughout the day, like being aware of the present moment in my body, and where I'm at, really listening to my body. So if I was hungry, I would eat. And if I wasn't hungry, I wouldn't eat. And I guess like through those practices, and really doing it every single day. And of course, like there's ups and downs, like some days are better than other days. But yeah, just really, really having that consistency, and trying to essentially change my mind is what I had to do, because the eating disorder really gets so ingrained that you kind of have to rewire your brain in a sense, and like try to create neurogenesis to have a different pattern of thinking.
Is it still, are you still doing the mindfulness and the intuitive eating? Is it still like a kind of a daily practice, or do you feel like I'm recovered, I'm good? You know, where are you on the recovery journey?
Yeah, on the recovery journey, like for a while, like I was great. Like I honestly, yeah, the mindfulness meditation is part of my daily life. Like it's just stuck with me. Like yeah, regardless of like the current state I'm in, like yeah, that's just like part of my life now. But which definitely does help. But I mean, I would say I'm mostly recovered. Like I would, in a sense, like say that I recovered, like 2 years ago or so. But now, like, it's still kind of, I'd say it's still like a lifelong journey in a way, because yeah, just like depending on um, maybe not depending on my emotional state, but yeah, just there's definitely those ups and downs, and depending on like life events that happen, like it can kind of spark like those past events that happen, and can, like, the eating disorder can come back up in a sense, and then you just got to keep it in check, and yeah, really nail down like those techniques to try to prevent like those triggers that I feel. And so yeah, still kind of have ups and downs like to this day, but for the most part, through all of the practicing and really nailing down those techniques, I'm able to prevent it.
So I want to go back to, you were talking earlier about the stigma, stigma and the stereotypes. And as you and I have kind of chatted about before, being a male is considered a kind of a diverse sample in the eating disorder world. So did you ever feel that stigma, or did you have a fear? Like, what was part of what was preventing you from seeking treatment? That the fear of the stigma? Like, did that play a role at all?
Yeah, definitely. It did. Like at first, especially thinking about like what my teammates would think of me, and not even that. Yeah, just yeah, the stigma in general, like with the community, my peers, like at school, and yeah, because especially when I was really struggling, like you feel a sense of shame, a sense of guilt. Like it really, really takes a toll on all aspects of your life, and especially the stigma. Like it can with that, it can also like bring you into a state of depression, like high anxiety, and all of those kind of elevate the stigma in a way, or the stigma elevates that. I don't know, like they kind of go hand in hand. And um, yeah, essentially, um, I just had to not be afraid to ask for help. And I had to realize that that was like the only way that things would get better, is if I did ask for help. And so eventually I just had to get past the stigma and not worry and not care about it, and try to fight the stigma.
So we may have students who are watching this video who are where you were when you were in high school, and they know they need help, but they have all of these fears about stigma, about telling other people. Um, and you talked about your breaking point. And so what advice do you have for someone who is kind of going through these motions of like, okay, this is not healthy, this is not normal eating or exercise behavior, I need help, but yet they are either denying that they need help, or they don't know what to do, or they feel that shame and that stigma, and so that's preventing them from going forward. So what advice would you give to someone who's kind of on that brink of knowing they need help, but they're afraid to take that next step?
Yeah, I'd say one of the most important things is to know that you're loved no matter what. Yeah, you're loved, you are valued, and you have tons and tons of worth. And there's nothing to be afraid of to ask for help. And um, eating disorders are very serious. And the longer you wait, the worse that it can, essentially, the worse the behaviors can get. Um, and that seeking treatment, yeah, is one of the most important aspects. There's nothing to be afraid of for asking for help. I would say reaching out to a loved one, somebody that you trust, and trying to get connected to a professional near you. That just stepping into the phase of recovery, I'd say would be the biggest thing.
So it sounds like you were the one who made that first step to realizing you had a problem, and you went to talk to your best friend about it. So what if it's the flip side? So if we have someone who feels like they have a best friend, a roommate, a loved one, a family member, someone in their life, and they're really worried about them, and they don't know how to broach that conversation, what advice do you have for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, especially trying to break the ice there to really, yeah, to bring up seeking treatment. I'd say how approaching the conversation in a very compassionate and loving way is important. because especially with somebody struggling, they're in a very, very vulnerable or emotionally vulnerable state. And so yeah, approaching the conversation with love and empathy, and letting them, expressing your concern, letting them know that you're worried about them, and you would like to see them get better. And yeah, other than that, like there's honestly not too much. Like that person has to decide for themselves if they want to get better, but just starting that conversation, just letting them know that they're not alone, that you're there for them, and that there are options for getting help. And maybe letting them know too that the longer they wait, the harder that it'll get. And yeah, the sooner they jump into it, the sooner that they can get better. And also, yeah, actually, I'll leave it at that.
I think one of the themes that I'm hearing in all of the stuff that you're talking about is it's a journey, and to be prepared that it may not be an easy journey sometimes, but that it's worth being on the other side and being in a healthy place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to be cognizant of our time, and thank you for taking time out of your day to do this with us today. Any parting words, any last thing that we didn't get to touch on that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I just want to let everybody know that they're loved, and that there's nothing wrong with asking for help or trying to get help for your loved ones.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris.
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you.